Oh, hi, third, fourth, and fifth graders. Here I am in our sanctuary this week, and I'm listening for God. Our lesson this week is all about listening for God, and we've got a wonderful story from the Bible about a young boy. His name was Samuel, and what happened to him when he started listening for God. Let's go up to the classroom and find out more about Samuel. Okay, here we are back up in the classroom. And as I said, today we're going to be talking about a very special person from the Bible, Samuel. Samuel was an important prophet of God. That means he had a special connection with God, and that started when he was a very young boy. In fact, the story today takes place when Samuel was probably about your age. And the kind of cool thing about that is God can use us and call us no matter what age we are. Let's get to the story that's in the Bible. Would you take your Spark Bibles and would you turn to the title page of 1 Samuel? It's in the Old Testament, so this means that it happened a long, long time ago, before Christ was born, before Jesus was born. And would you turn to page 295? 295. That's the beginning of 1 Samuel. And you'll see there's a 1 in front of this title, Samuel. And that tells us that there's more than one book about Samuel. And there are 2 books about the life of Samuel, because he was a really important person in the Bible and for doing the work of God. So this is 1 Samuel that we're going to be reading from today. It's more about the beginnings of Samuel's life when he was younger. So turn the page from the title page, turn one page and then another page until you are in chapter 3, chapter 3, and that's where we're going to begin today. And I'm going to read to you verses 1 through 10 up to here. And the title of this section is called Samuel's Calling and Prophetic Activity. That means prophetic comes from the word prophet, and Samuel was a prophet of God. He had a very special connection and could get messages from God, and then Samuel took those messages from God out and told all of the people of Israel, what God had sent. Okay, would you follow along, please? Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. Remember, Eli was Samuel's teacher. He was the priest and the minister of the church. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel, Samuel. And he said, Here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. But Eli, did not call. Go lie down again. So he went and lay down. The Lord called again, Samuel. Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. But Eli said, I did not call, my son. Lie down again. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again, a third time. And he got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if God calls you, you say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Now the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Wow, what'd you think of that story? How do you think Samuel felt when he figured out it was God talking to him? That was the first time that Samuel had talked with God and understood that God and he had a special connection, and that he was born to share the messages from God with the people around him. Did you catch where he said, "Speak, Lord"? That's what Eli had told him to say. "Speak, Lord, for your servant," meaning Samuel. Samuel is listening. And he let God know that he was ready. He was ready to take his word. And sometimes we have to do that too. Sometimes we have to put on our big ears and listen to what God might be telling us. And it doesn't mean that God's always going to call our name. He might, but like it said in the Bible, it was rare, very rare. It didn't hardly ever happen. So sometimes we get messages through our hearts and our feelings. Sometimes we get them through ideas and thoughts in our brains that maybe they're just little messages that God is sending to us through those things. Sometimes it's messages that we get, communication we get from other people, and it's actually something that God is, in a way that God is sending a message to us. So I want you to watch this next little cartoon. It's a little cartoon about the story of Samuel, and think about, when you're watching it, think about what it must have been like for Samuel, because he was about your age, and all the feelings that he must have been having when he found out that he was a servant of God who was going to be relaying messages from God. Here's the video.
Stories of the Bible. God speaks to Samuel. This is Samuel.
Hi!
Samuel was the son of Hannah.
Hey, Samuel!
Hannah prayed for God to give her a son, and God did. So Hannah gave Samuel back to God.
See you, Samuel. Bye, Mom.
And Samuel grew up in the temple serving under Eli, the priest.
Hi, Eli.
As Samuel grew up, he learned how to serve God from Eli. Samuel lived in the house of God, but he did not know God or what God's voice sounded like. In those days, messages from God were rare. But one night after Eli had gone to bed, Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle when suddenly God called out, "Samuel!"
Huh?
Samuel got up and ran to Eli and said, "Did you call me?"
Not me.
Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." So Samuel did. Then God called out again, "Samuel!"
Huh?
And again Samuel got up and ran to Eli asking, "Did you call me?"
Not me.
Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." So Samuel did. God called Samuel for a third time, "Samuel!"
Huh?
And Samuel went to Eli yet again. After 3 times, Eli realized that God was trying to speak to Samuel. So Eli taught Samuel to say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening."
Okay.
Samuel went back to bed, and God came and called as before, "Samuel, Samuel!" And Samuel said, "Speak, your servant is listening." God told him many things about what would happen to Israel. As Samuel grew up, God was with him, and everything God spoke through Samuel came true. Samuel was seen as a great prophet of God because he could hear the voice of God and he listened when God spoke to him.
Okay, now that we are done with that little video, did you think about what Samuel might have been feeling all that time that God was calling his name? And here's some other questions. Take your pamphlet that goes with this lesson. It's God Calls Samuel pamphlet, and here's some other questions that you could think about. How do you think he felt the first time he heard God's voice? How do you think Samuel felt as God continued to talk to him in the years to come? Because remember, he was a prophet, and so he talked to God for the rest of his life. Ooh, that must have been really exciting. How can I keep listening for the voice of God? And remember, we have to listen to our ideas in our heads and our feelings in our hearts, because we might not always hear God saying our voice. And the story that we're going to read next is about a lady that she takes her feelings and her thoughts in her head and realizes that God is speaking to her in that way, and she listened and she responded to what God was trying to tell her. As we read this, remember that it doesn't matter how old we are. And the lady in this story is older. Samuel was younger. It doesn't matter how old we are. God can speak to us anytime. And so let's see what God was saying in this story. The title is Listen, God is Calling You. Follow along and I'll read it out loud. Are you going to that relief shelter again, Grandma? Asked Elena. I hardly see you anymore. Ever since a tornado ripped through their town 2 months ago, Grandma Lenora seemed to visit the Red Cross office every day. I go because God told me to go, she replied. Elena's eyes grew big. God told you? She asked. When? How? You saw God? You heard God? Grandma Lenora chuckled. Not exactly that way, she said. But when the tornado came, I knew I had to help. So many people lost their homes, and others had no jobs to go to because the buildings where they worked were destroyed. Elena thought about Justin, a boy in her class. She saw his apartment building on the news. It was just a pile of debris. Grandma went on. I wanted to see if I could help. When I walked into the shelter, I felt very still inside. I saw so many people I knew. My heart began to ache for them. Grandma stopped talking and wiped her eyes. God reminded me that Jesus told us that when we help others, it's as if we are helping Jesus. So I listened and obeyed. I am helping people I know, and I've met many wonderful new friends there. Elena was quiet for a moment. Can I come with you? She asked. Maybe I'll hear God's voice there too. Grandma Lenora took Elena's hand. Of course, dear. Of course. Well, just like Grandma in this story, we have ways that we can help others. Remember when we talked about that in one of our lessons from before, that Jesus tells us whenever we're helping other people, it's just the same as helping Him. This is very much the same as it is, when people are in need, like this horrible tornado that destroyed their town and Grandma went to help them. When we have people that we know are in need and we help, then that's one way that God is speaking to us, or giving us the idea, or giving us the feelings that we need to go and help others. And you guys probably do that every day and without even thinking that somebody's talking with you, that God maybe is sending you little communications and little messages, that the right thing to do is to help other people. Now, would you turn to the second page in your pamphlet? This is kind of a cool page. There's all kinds of ways to communicate, aren't there? There's different languages. There's, we can nod our head or shake our head. And one of the cool ways that we can communicate is through sign language. And this page is giving us little code words to figure out using the sign language alphabet, which is down here. I'll bet a lot of you know the signs for the different letters of the alphabet. So I'm going to let you stop and pause the video, and you can figure out what words fit in the blanks here by spelling them out with the matching letters from the sign language alphabet. So for instance, here is this letter. It happens to be the letter S, and you can match it with this picture of the letter S down here. So you'd put an S there. This is the letter A because it matches up with the sign language for letter A. This is M. Here's M. This is U. There's the matching. This is E. And this is L. So who said, "Here I am"? Samuel. So you can write Samuel in here. So pause the video now and finish filling in the rest of the words in those blanks. Okay, if you're all done, you should have the first one again. Who said, "Here I am"? That should be Samuel. Samuel first thought Eli was calling him. You should have Eli. Where did Samuel live? Temple. He lived in the temple. Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant," you should have servant, "is listening." And that is our very special verse for the week. From the Bible it said, "Now the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, 'Samuel, Samuel.' And Samuel said, 'Speak, for your servant is listening.'" And that was from 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10. Okay, now I want you to turn to the third page of the pamphlet. It looks like this, and you can take some time to go over the fun facts and read about Samuel and Eli, some more things. And then I want you to take a look at this. This is a puzzle piece, a puzzle that's all mixed up. The pieces are all mixed up. And I want you to cut out each little piece and pause the video and cut out each little piece, and then see if you can put the puzzle together. And it shows some kids working on a way that God might be calling them to serve others, and see if you can tell what they're doing. There's some good clues there you can probably guess. But take a minute to do that. It's kind of fun to put those together. Make sure you cut them out as nicely as you can. They'll fit together more easily that way. And then I'll be back and show you the finished puzzle. Pause the video right now. Okay, here's what the finished puzzle should look like. Mine is a little bit jagged in places. I'm sure yours looks a whole lot better than mine. But anyway, the picture is of the kids recycling. And that is one way that we can serve God, is by taking care of the creation that God has given us, There are many ways that we can serve God. If you find your cross that we did several lessons ago and you put stickers on about different ways that you thought were good for serving God, take a look at that again and remind yourself that even though you didn't hear God call your name, those might have been ways that God has given you ideas or feelings in your heart and called you to do those things to help others. And in the days ahead, I want you to look and listen and feel and think about all the ways that you can help God by helping others and serving God by serving others. Do that at home and at school and any time you're in a place where you can be a servant of God. And I bet God is actually calling you to be that good servant. Okay, let's end with a prayer. Will you bow your head and pray with me? Dear God, open our ears to hear your voice. Help us always to be good listeners and good servants for your work in the world. Amen. You've done a great job today. I'll look forward to seeing you in another lesson. Bye.